So a little bit about me, and you heard a little tidbit, I'll talk about that in a minute. I have a relationship with like almost all the speakers' topics at some level. I did genomics for 10 years after my biostat PhD, and then I got sick of it. Simply because the way the field was going in one direction. I didn't like the direction. Right now I work at NIAMS. Anyone here from NIH or HHS? Good, so I don't have to give you the test as to what NIAMS is. NIH is 27 institutes, you're supposed to know the acronyms for most of them. This is the arthritis group, so obviously rheumatology. I co-founded a startup called Zansors, which we do sensors for sleep apnea screening, and a few other things. I'll talk about some of the work I'm doing there today. So NIH is north 15 miles, Zansors is in Arlington, which is right across the river. I'm a biostatistician, but as I mentioned, I actually don't do clinical trials except as a reviewer. So I'm a data safety monitoring board member for mental health trials for the NIH, and I also am a reviewer for SBIR trials in neurobiology. So I'm all over the place. So if my talk is scattered, you'll understand why. I teach Practical R, which is the name of the course at the NIH graduate school, which is their basic R class. That's taught to all the graduate students in the bioinformatics data science program. Most of you have met Martin at some point. He teaches the basic Python class there. So we sort of partner and are colleagues in arms there. And my personal interest in this area is in statistical machine learning, data visualization, which I'll talk about today, and how do we pass this knowledge on efficiently to the next generation of whatever you want to call yourself, be it data scientist, statistician, operations researcher, or whatnot. On the community side, we've already mentioned, I've survived the grind of the data community. I was at the first meetup in DC, literally 8 years ago. I'm a board member of Data Community DC, and somehow, I know Jared mentioned this earlier about books and meetups and the like. I actually managed to co-author a book with some other people who were in the community a few years ago. Wouldn't be here without my family. So this is from Diwali, like 3 days ago, literally. My wife and daughters made the rangoli, which is on the floor. And so I did my duty as a father and a husband and just appreciated their creativity. Because there's no way I'm doing that. My wife is now working on her third master's, so she's far more qualified than me. And both my daughters are classically trained in Indian dance, and they're also on advanced choruses at their school. So you think there's a lot of song and dance at home, but it's nothing to do with Bollywood, which is really nice. My older one is practicing to play Ursula in The Little Mermaid this spring, so very different kind of song. And speaking of Aikido, we talked about it a little bit. This is the second longest relationship I have after my parents. It predates my marriage, and it's the reason I maintain sanity. I stuck around long enough. This is proof that if you stick around long enough in something, you'll actually get somewhere. It's like, the bad person that doesn't go away even though they keep throwing him. Finally got a 4th-degree black belt a few years ago. I teach about 50 miles north of here in a place called Newmarket. For those of you who know Frederick, it's like the next town over. And if you've never seen Aikido, these are my friends from Rochester, and they're actually husband and wife, so this is how they get rid of their marital angst. They're wonderful people. They're also smiths. They actually make iron stuff. So this is, if you've never seen Aikido. And the guy standing in the back, you can see it much better on the screens than on this screen, which is a little fuzzy. That's my instructor from Japan. In this picture, you'll believe it or not, he is 80 years old in this picture. He's now 81. This is from last year. He can still kick my butt. So it's pretty interesting for a guy who's 122 pounds. So that's what I do when I'm want to get blow off steam. So regardless, I actually added this slide after listening to all the talks in this meetup, because it got me thinking. So if someone was talking to Dave Smith that he's started before R was R, I'm almost there. I remember starting in 1997. So it's been 20 years, I think version 0.3. So, Roger said yesterday version 0.6, he doesn't have gray hair yet. You have to get gray hair to get way back there. But the thing that I want to say about this is that in those days we were dealing with base R and base plotting and stuff that people sort of don't use anymore in some ways. But it took a good 10 years of working on that and developing that. A lot of the infrastructure came from S+ before, but CRAN was tiny. CRAN was in 2 digits, right? And then so we did that for 10 years, and then thank God Hadley Wickham got a PhD and created ggplot, and then created Plier, and created Reshape, and Reshape 2, and dplyr, and what's now become the tidyverse, and all the RStudio supported stuff that's out there now. So someone was mentioning something about a hockey stick shaped graph. Well, Hadley's the corner of that graph, in my opinion, in terms of where things happened, in terms of growth, right? But the nice thing that's happened now, and it's sort of reflected in my talk and a lot of the talks that have happened over the last few days, or last few hours, essentially, last 48 hours, is that R has become a glue language in many ways for data science. So we've gotten the core parts of R pretty well set, right, with tidyverse and a lot of the packages that know what they're doing, and with Bioconductor, which has been fantastic for the biological sciences and genomics and all the omics stuff that those of us who are NIH or in pharma or in biotech use all the time, which, by the way, historically started up the street as well at Hopkins. So Rafael Irizarry, who was at Hopkins at the time, was crucial in starting all of that. So a lot of stuff has happened here. But now it's become a glue language, right? I mean, today we're getting wrappers around things that allow us to ingest all sorts of data. So Haven is a package I use all the time to grab SAS data. There's XML, there's all sorts of things that basically if there's data out there, R can ingest it now to the efforts of a lot of people. And on the back end of this, we've gotten to the point where we've wrapped these beautiful JavaScript visualization libraries from R through HTMLwidgets or other platforms, right? So R's, and not just there, who here has tried out the RStudio preview version, the version 1.2 that's on the preview? I know you're using it, so as am I. If you go down the list so on the left corner when you hit that plus button and said, RScript or R Markdown or text or whatever, the new version includes Python, SQL, Stan, and there's some other language that's in there as well. So RStudio and R is becoming the glue language. Reticulate, who here's used Reticulate or knows of the package Reticulate? So Reticulate is a play on Python, right? It's another kind of Python other than Anaconda. And it connects R to Python, or Python to R. There's always been RPy2, which connected R to Python. So the point is you don't have to be a monoglot anymore in data science. You can actually interactively use different things, and R seems to be one of the good glues around that. So great time to be in R and come to an R conference and use it, because it's really, really rich now. It's worth sticking around for 20 years like the other stuff, right? Now it's finally fun. It's been fun for a while, actually. So what I'm going to talk about today, I sort of have to talk about what I put in my abstract to some extent. So Zansors is about 5 years old. We've been doing these sort of small patches. You see it in real time on a model in a couple of slides. It's about yay big. 6 on your lapel, 6 on your neck. And the primary purpose that we had of this was to try and detect sleep apnea in a comfortable situation. Anyone here has ever taken a sleep study? Polysomnography? Lucky you. Sleep apnea testing requires you to be overnight in a hospital with 16 leads on you, including a chest strap, a head cap, a cannula, and all sorts of wires. So yeah, you're getting real great sleep on a sleep lab. One of the big problems we found talking with people around this is that you have to do this to children sometimes, and children hate it, especially the cannula. So trying to think of new ways. So this is in process. Of course, this needs to deal with FDA and stuff like that. But what we realized is we can actually leverage this technology to work with activity monitoring through breath work, right? To your breath rate as opposed to heart rate. And so when we went there, we realized that we sort of have to compare this and figure out sort of what ground truth is. We had a talk from NIST about talking about ground truth and how to compare things. So there's not really ground truth here unless you go to an exercise lab and do stuff. And we've done some of that. But also just field testing, right? The runners are enormously tech savvy, right? They're wired with Garmin's and whatnot. Today, a lot of us are wearing a smartwatch or a Fitbit or whatever. So we have sensors on us that collect activity data. And so what I'm going to talk about is how you can sort of grab at that and play with it. So the data I'm going to talk about today is actually GPS data from a Garmin Forerunner. which one of our crash test dummies used on a few runs. And he also had an additional heart rate strap, so we got heart rate through that as well. Now, I hadn't played with this data before, so I went out and looked, sort of the kind of stuff that Mara just talked about. And I found out that essentially you can get all this data in something called GPX format, which is the GPS exchange format. Turns out all it is XML. So it's not rocket science, thankfully. It's an open format that you can check, and the DOM is well known and you know how to do it. And so there are packages people have written for this. So in PlotKML, there is a read GPX function. In MapTools, there's a read GPS function. But since this is just an XML file, I went bare metal on it and used the XML package, right? And so Gory Code, we're not going to go through the details of it, but the point ends up being that you can extract each of the tracks that you would see displayed on on like Strava or Runtastic or whatever your favorite software is, by grabbing essentially those 4 lines, which just grab out the tagged data from the XML file. So really, it's really easy. So what we're trying to do here, so you can tell how small this thing is. It's literally on the guy's lapel. We're detecting breathing and motion, so there's an accelerometer in here, there's a microphone, and we distill the raw signals into respiration rates and cadence, which is how many times you're stepping per minute, and you can because of the accelerometer. I won't go into the details of how I do that for obvious reasons, but I will talk about how to sort of use that and sort of create some visualizations with it. So we've seen a lot of Leaflet this conference, right? Very easy. So this is an example of one run. So I took the longitude and latitude from the GPS and just plotted it. And this person was going, for those of you who know this area, went sort of from central Arlington, crossed the river, and went to DuPont Circle. So Leaflet is great, but we've got other tracks, right? So we're not just dealing with where they went. We're talking about things like elevation, things about heart rate that they have, the breathing rate that we're picking up. So sort of thinking more in R. So first of all, I'm going to go to ggplot plus, sort of leveraging what Mark talked about yesterday. And the first thing I'm going to show is GGMap, one of the ones that Mark didn't talk about. So GGMap makes it very easy to do maps. So this is off a Google map, and you can tell it there's different kinds of maps you can do. This one is the map type is road map. You can do a terrain map. There's all sorts of things you can do. And then the syntax is very ggplot, right? The one little twinkle that has happened in the last year is Google changed their policy. You now need an API key to actually get the maps, which means they want your credit card, right? As some of you have probably figured out who use maps. OpenStreetMap is an alternative, but they were more kludgy in terms of this connection for whatever reason. So I can make a nice static map of this route. I can even use things like HowPlot or grid arrange so there's several packages in the ggplot extension world that will create multiple independent ggplot objects and put them together, right? I tend to prefer HowPlot. I have no idea why the man named it HowPlot, because it's a personal package that he released. It's this lab package that he released, but it's really, really nice. And so what I'm seeing here is the run on one side, and then the right side, I'm seeing his heart rate over time, and then there's this weird dip, right? Suspicious. The first part I get, because he's starting his run from static, right? But there's this weird dip. But the problem is the static graphs connect these two, right? I don't know which part of the run this happened in. And so there's really, really nice tools. So Jared briefly mentioned Crosstalk at some point, I know. So Crosstalk is this really nice package that has been written to share data across visualizations. And not all visualizations are Crosstalk ready, so caveat emptor. Leaflet is, and D3 scatter is. The one that you normally use for this kind of data is digraphs. If you go to the HTMLwidgets website and start mining it, digraphs is the time series one. It's not Crosstalk ready. And I actually went on their GitHub issues page. It's still, after 3 years, it's still not Crosstalk ready. They're still discussing it. So D3 scatter worked pretty well. And so the idea here is actually very elegant in some ways. So at the very beginning, you create a shared data set, and then you share it with each of these different visualizations. And you arrange it through this BS calls function, and so you just set it up in columns. So it's very, very, I find it very elegant to work with it. The interesting thing with this, of course, is the syntax that I see in Leaflet and D3 Scatter reminds me of GGViz with the tilde notations, with the one-sided formulas. Yeah, Jared's laughing because he actually gave a talk with GGViz, and I remember it. And it's dead, basically, now. It's dead in the water. Not his talk and not really, but GGViz is dead in the water. But the notations stuck around for some reason. So this reminded me of that. At the very bottom, I have a filter slider. So the reason that Crosstalk does two things well. It is meant to do what's called linked brushing. So if you have two pictures, and you select a part of it, it'll automatically select the corresponding points in the other one, which is great unless you have a lot of points and you can't tell the difference between what's selected and what's not. So I added the filter slider to just kill a bunch of points when I want to drill in, and then I can actually do the link brushing. So that's the reason for that, and you'll see in a minute. So that's why that filter slider happened. So these are actually linked. So now I have Leaflet on the left, and I have the D3 Scatter on the right. Same data. So you notice this will actually be live. So if I actually select that part, it is selected, but it's not lightning enough on this side for me to find out where that's being selected, right? That's why I needed the filter. So let's get out of that. So this is roughly at 10 minutes into the run. So let's take this slider and go, I'm going to bring you to about a little earlier, so let's go to 8 minutes. And let's bring this side down to, you want to move with me today? Thank you. Please? Pretty please? It doesn't like me today. I'm sorry. The current feeding of sliders has not happened, I'm sorry. But I know the answer, so I'm going to actually drill down to it. So this is at the very beginning of this. So now I've actually seen where the drop is. This is at the beginning. So both sides got cut off, right? So if I move this slider back a little bit, you see that both graphs are growing back out. So if I bring it back down to 8, I'm at the beginning of this drop, so I'm way down here. So let's go in there. Move it up a little bit so people can see. And so if I just see where this drop happened, now this thing will actually, because I have fewer points, I can see exactly what happened. It's this little dark. It's going to look much better on the LCDs if you're back there. The drop happened because he was waiting at a crosswalk for about 2 minutes, which is a really long crosswalk stop. But his heart rate fell. But this is part of the power of these linked dynamic visualizations. I can drill down from the graph and go, there's an explanation here, because this is weird. And so being able to find that is actually really, really nice. I'm going to add respiration to that panel. So same data set, same structure, except I'm doing 2 panels, one with respiration, one with heart rate. And hopefully that will work. There we go. So it's the same panel, I just squished them. So the top one is heart rate, the bottom one is respiration. And we saw, and the nice validation for us was that when the heart rate went down, so did the respiration. So let's see the story. So his heart rate went down. He has to get it back up to his training level. So he works very hard to get it up there really quickly. So his breathing goes up and then stabilizes. And then there's a little bit with elevation here that I'm not showing today, which is fine. And then there's this really weird piece right here. This piece that if it actually selects. It's selecting on my screen, but it's not selecting very well there. That piece, which is really weird. So why are you breathing so hard for about 5 minutes of breathing that fast? So same deal. Let's go to minute 35. Hopefully this will slide over because it seems to behave. There we go. And then let's see if this right side actually wants to move. The right side just doesn't want to move for me today. It's okay. So what you realize is this beginning of this was when he was crossing the Key Bridge. Has anyone from DC actually walked across the Key Bridge? You realize how windy it is? That's what happened there. The mic didn't have a windscreen on it, and so we got a lot of noise on that screen, and that created an artifact, which was great for us. This was actually one of our early experiments that helped us figure stuff out here. But it's stuff like, so this was really part of what I was doing when I was analyzing this, because you can't squint at the data per se. You have to really look at it. And tools like this were really, really invaluable for it. So what would you do next? So I have created dashboards. I'm not showing it to you. You can create a Shiny app. It's all this fun stuff that everyone is now doing. If you haven't used Flex Dashboard, I'm actually, that's my new love affair because it's really, really nice. And there's actually a really nice article as to when you should use Flex Dashboard and when you should use Shiny. I forget who wrote it. It might be David or it might have been Hadley. Someone wrote it. Basically, Flex Dashboard does not have a Shiny server underneath it, so it's just native JavaScript connections. But it's really nice. Or you can just have some fun. So there's another sort of nice package that Thomas Peterson has updated recently called GGAnimate, which was originally a David Robinson package, and it's no longer. Actually, it's really funny going onto Stack or onto Google, because some people have the old API that David wrote, and some people use the new API that Thomas wrote, and they don't tell you which one they're using. And so suddenly you're going GGAnimate P, and you realize, no, that's David's, that's not Thomas's. So it's very interesting. So buyer beware when you're looking online for GGAnimate advice. And so you can do, literally with 2 additional lines of code from what I did for my ggplot, I can actually track what you did. So it's very, very easy now, which is sweet. So I'm actually on time. So Jared can thank me later. The presentation is on GitHub, and I have a blog and stuff on Netlify, following the EWE path of blog down and so on. I'd like to end with one thing. It's almost toward the end of the conference, and it's been a great conference. I'd like to ask for a round of applause for Jared and Mark and all the Lander crew who've done a wonderful job, and all the sponsors. I know there's only 2 left, but great job, guys. Hopefully we'll see you again next year. Okay, thank you very much.